Let's see. All right, we're on. All right, so we spent a lot of time week before last week. We didn't advance, so we didn't record it. we talked about a lot of important stuff and answered some questions, but we weren't in Matthew necessarily. So we're through with the parable, and we're gonna go ahead and go right into verse 15 through 22, and we have a situation where, remember, the triumphal entry has occurred. He came in, he presented himself as Messiah, he exercised his authority, he cleaned the temple out, and the leadership questioned his authority, and he demonstrated his authority by healing people right there in front of them, where they couldn't deny it, and so they don't want anything to do with the guy, and so he gave them that parable in the beginning of chapter 22. That was chapter 21. In chapter 22, he gave them the parable, and the parable is not a difficult parable to interpret when you know the context, because he's talking about them. He's talking about they're the ones that at the beginning of 22, they're the ones that were invited to the wedding feast, and they're the ones that got called several times to come. It's ready, it's set up, the animals are butchered, all of this, and they're like, oh, I've got something else to do. That's Israel. That's what we've seen our whole study, isn't it? Ever since John the Baptist came on the scene and Jesus came on the scene, oh my goodness, he's here to heal, we'll take the healing. No thanks. As far as Messiah, we're not interested. Common people and the leadership, by the way. And so that's what that's all about. And it said that it said in there that he's, they would seize the slaves, they would kill them, and the king was enraged, and he sent an army and he wiped them out, and that's exactly what's going to happen to them. 30 years down the road, in 70 AD, the Roman legions came with Titus, and they wiped everybody out. They surrounded Israel. They starved Israel. They surrounded Jerusalem. They starved the people in Jerusalem to death. Some of them were eating their own children, it says, and they were devastated. And that's when the Great Dispersion occurred. That is still going on to today. Now, we've started. Jews have the return has started in unbelief, and they were established as a nation. But this is what happened. This is what happened with them. And so, when they wouldn't come, what did he do? He threw the doors open. He said, "Go out and invite people off the streets." And so I think, as we talked about before, I think this is the church. I think before the king returns and the kingdom is set up, he extended mercy to the Gentiles, like Paul says he did in Romans 11. And so you're seeing people saved from every tribe, tongue, and nation, and that's what's going on right now. And so that was. And at the end of all of this, there's going to be an evaluation, right? Some people think they're in. They don't have their wedding clothes, and so they're going to be cast out. And we talked about the relationship with that in Matthew 25, and we'll talk about that again when we get to Matthew 25. And so they're trying to trip him up. At this point, what their goal is they want to trip him up so other people get mad at him. Okay? So on the back of that chapter 22, starting in verse 15, they set a trap. In fact, it says, the New American Standard says, trap him. Let's have someone read verses 15 through 22, and we'll talk about that.
Then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true, and teach the way of God in truth, nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar, or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness, and he said, Why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the tax money. So they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, Whose image and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard these words, they marveled, and they left him and went their way.
Okay, these are fairly intelligent people that are trying to do this, obviously. And they're trying to come up with things like we've seen up to this point. They try to come up with something that they believe whatever he answers, he's going to be in trouble with one group or another. That's what we've seen so far. They asked about divorce because remember, at this point they're not going to the original text and trying to explain the text within the context. They're going to the rabbis. What do the rabbis say about this? It's like somebody studying the Bible and all they do is read what the commentaries say. That's what's going on in the first century. And so you had two rabbis that had two extreme opinions on divorce. Remember Matthew 19, and so they're thinking, okay, whatever he answers, he's going to be in trouble with one group or another. So the same thing here, because you have Jews that say we should not have to be paid tax to Caesar to vote. No, we shouldn't have to pay him money to be able to vote. And so they think, okay, if Jesus says you got to pay the taxes, he's in trouble with that group. So he's going to lose support. All right? And then what if he says they shouldn't pay taxes to Caesar?
He's in trouble with Rome.
You think there's some Roman soldiers hanging around there listening? Well, absolutely. So this is what they're not coming up here to figure out some kind of information. In fact, you can almost hear the serpent hissing here, because he thinks he's got him. All right? And when you understand the groups that are working here, you know something's up, because you have the Pharisees that are the legalists of the day. And then you have the Herodians. And of course the Pharisees don't like Rome. They tolerate Rome. The Herodians actually are a group of people in favor of the rule of the Herods. All of Herod the Great's sons have tetrarchies. They support them. Well, neither group like each other. But both realize that this guy's threatening both of us, okay? So we're going to come together and do him in. So that's the situation here. And so they don't walk up and tell him what they think of him, do they? No.
They're going to go plot some more.
What? No. What is this? What is this? Teacher. First of all, that's a sign of respect. Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth and defer no one, for you are not partial to anyone. You know what that's called? Flattery. That's like, Mom, I love you. Can I have one of those cookies? That's what that is. That's what's going on there. And so you talk about buttering him up. They're buttering him up. And you're partial to no one, You're this incredible guy, Tell us then, what do you think? So now they're wanting him to stick his head out on the chopping block. Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar? This is Tiberius Caesar is actually ruling at this point, or not. But Jesus perceived their malice. and said. He see right through them, didn't he? He knew what was going on. I mean, none of these. I mean, when is the last time a real spiritual leader in Israel walked up with a serious question? The only one I know of is Nicodemus, and he came at night.
That's right.
You know, these guys are not openly coming up and seriously asking questions because they are concerned or interested. No. Even Nicodemus hid when he did want to ask seriously. And so he calls it what it is. You are testing me, and you are a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite. So he blows their socks off with his answer. Show me the coin. The coin has Caesar on it. That's Caesar's. Give it to Caesar. But you give to God what is God's. Are they giving anything to God at this point? They may be giving stuff to be seen by men, as we saw back in the Sermon on the Mount. Remember, he kept saying that's why they do it. They do it to be seen by men. And you know what? They've got their reward right here on earth. That's all they get. That's why these guys give to God, to be seen by men. None of them are giving out of a pure heart and rendering to God what is God's. And hearing this, they were amazed. Leaving him, they went away. They couldn't do it. And it's the same today. I mean, we pay taxes, and we don't worry about running out of resources, because God's going to take care of us. You know, he will get us through. We may not always have everything we need. I mean, everything we want, but we'll have everything we need. And so we pay taxes. That doesn't mean we can't protest our taxes. I'm going Friday to protest my taxes. I mean, they went up $23,000 on the value of the land. You know, and our land is, I mean, it's just not very nice land. You know, it's got drainage and water and all this stuff running through it, soil washing away. Anyway, you can protest your land, but you know what? If they say that's what the taxes are, I'm going to pay them. I'm going to pay them. You know, and what they do with the money, that's between them and God. I'm not going to be standing for the judgment seat based on what they did with my money. All right, so that's the situation here. So then another group comes, and they've got it figured out. They're going to get him on this one. All right, so it's the Sadducees. Sadducees were in many ways your modern day liberal. They didn't necessarily believe the Bible was inspired, and they saw a lot of intellectual problems with the Bible. So they had these things that kept them from believing the Bible intellectually. So they come to Jesus, and let's have somebody read 23 through, where's the end of that one? 23 through 33. Go ahead and go all the way down to 33. Yep. 23 through 33, someone please.
The same day the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses said that if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were with us 7 brothers. The first died after he had married, and having no offspring left his wife to his brothers. Likewise the second also, and the third even to the 7th. Last of all the woman died also. Therefore in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. Jesus answered and said to them, You are mistaken, not knowing the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching.
All right. Actually, a lot of theology here, isn't there? I want to read Acts 23:8. Acts 23:8. This is Paul before Ananias, and he said that verse 8 says, verse 7 says, and he said to us, there occurred a dissension between Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. That's over Paul, down the road from where we're reading in Matthew. He says, for the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, so they didn't believe in a resurrection, a bodily resurrection, nor an angel. They didn't believe in angels, nor a spirit. In other words, from what I've never studied super in depth what Sadducees believed, but going by this verse, they appear to be humanistic. In other words, you live this life, you die, you're done. I mean, if there's no spirit, there's no resurrection, there's no spirit, and that's the dominant belief, growing dominant belief in the United States, because humanism is basically taken over. But the Pharisees acknowledged them all. So the Pharisees were your fundamentalists, if you will. They believed what the Bible said. Now they added a bunch of stuff to it, and they became very legalistic. But they believed the Bible. The Sadducees did not. They didn't believe in an inerrant, inspired Bible. And so they reject bodily resurrection, angels, and that man has a spirit. All right? So this is the people, this is their point. So what they've done is they've understood what that says in the Mosaic Law, right? So the Mosaic Law, remember the cultural situation with the Mosaic Law. So you have a theocracy, right? You have the nation of Israel. They're placed in a specific piece of land, and they are given, each tribe is given a specific piece of land, right? So it's very important for men to have sons, so when they die, they take over that land and they cultivate that land, because this is all agrarian. This is way before the Industrial Revolution, right? Like way before it. And so this is agrarian. The world's agrarian society, the whole world at this point. And so it's very important working the land and having sheep and goats and cattle and that type of thing. And so what Moses said was, or God said through Moses, is you have this piece of land, and this man and his family own it. And the man dies. Okay, the brother takes that woman as a wife, has a child, a male child, by that woman, and so that male child acts as if just like it was the son of the one that died. He assumes ownership of that land and continues to work the land. So it's a unique situation because of the theocracy, the specific land, all of that type of thing.
Rusty, what if the brother's already married?
What if the what now?
The brother is already married.
He marries her.
So then he has two wives.
Yes, he does.
I didn't think that was kosher.
Well, apparently it was under the Mosaic Law and under that specific situation. Yeah, I don't think we can point to that and say, well, God changed his mind. It had everything to do with Israel as a nation in that land. And remember, the distinction of Israel from all other nations. God was the one that was their king, in a sense. In other words, that nation ran by laws given specifically by God. No other nation's been like that. Now, that's what the kingdom will be. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus will come as king. Everything will run exactly according to God's law during that period of time. So anyway, these humanistic Sadducees, so what they do is they, in their intellectual arguments, they've developed this argument, okay? That doesn't make any sense. Because, and we'll just make it real clear how foolish that idea is. we won't just talk about one guy dying. We'll talk about many guys dying. So this lady has been married to, how many did it say? 7? Okay. So, obviously, that shows how ridiculous the Old Testament is in some of its teaching. Because when they go to heaven, how are they going to sort that out? So again, intellectually, they were convinced they had him in a pickle and he was not getting out at all. All right? So that's what's going on here. They quote from the Old Testament. Verse 27 says, last of all, the woman died. And so, if you believe in physical resurrection, like the Sadducees or the Pharisees, Jesus, then you got a problem in heaven, right? Who's going to get the wife? Who's going to get the wife? Well, there is a presupposition that Jesus corrects here. There's an assumption. And this doctrinal truth, I can remember when my mom had lost my dad, and she was not doing well. She had Parkinson's, and she was thinking about Dad. She loved my dad so much. My mom and dad loved each other so much. And when my mom lost my dad, she died of a broken heart eventually. She couldn't take it. Anyway, that was a concern to her, their relationship in heaven. And I understand that, and probably all of you do too. If you've been married or you are married, you understand that. The love between a husband and a wife, we want to be eternal, But we don't understand the change that will happen in heaven because we've not experienced it. So Jesus responds here and corrects the presupposition, because their presupposition is you got to make a choice again. Once they get in heaven, she's got to be somebody's wife. Whose? So his response is this. Jesus answered and said, you're mistaken, not understanding the scriptures, nor the power of God. They didn't understand the scriptures because the Old Testament says that there will be physical resurrection. Turn over to, I've got some verses down there. Turn over to Isaiah 26:19. You can keep your hand in Matthew if you want to there. If you get to that, go ahead and read it.
You're dead.
26,
You're dead.
19.
26.
Yes. Isaiah 26:19.
Your dead will live, their corpses will rise. You who lie in the dust, awake and shout for joy, for your dew is as the dew of the dawn, and the earth will give birth to the departed spirit.
That's pretty clear, isn't it? And that's pretty clear. That's physical resurrection. One of the ones that people are uncertain about using in a situation like this, because there's some language questions, but you guys will recognize this, and that's the one by Job. Remember, Job was probably the first book written down of the biblical canon, period, of our Old Testament. And Job said, I know our Redeemer lives, and I'm going to see him someday in this flesh, and all of this stuff. It sounds like physical resurrection. I believe it is. So there's another one, if you want to count that one. There's also the one in Daniel chapter 12.
Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt.
Yeah, some people read these verses and they get soul sleep or something out of them, But it's the body that's sleeping, if you will. Remember, the sleep is used in a metaphorical way at that point. Because you see a dead body and it looks like it's asleep, And in a sense, it is if they're believers, because it's going to come back to life someday. It's going to wake up someday. So So in that sense, they didn't understand the scriptures. And they certainly did not understand the power of God. What problem does God have in raising somebody from the dead? You know, if you understand who God is, then you have no problem with understanding that He can. I mean, if He could speak everything in existence, that's my go-to. Okay, wait a minute. If God can speak everything in existence, we see, and even the things we can't see with our telescopes and microscopes and all of this, all the stuff in the bottom of the sea that we've never seen before a lot of times and stuff, you know, all this stuff. If God can speak and all of that is created, you telling me He's going to have a problem raising somebody from the dead? No. So that's their problem, is unbelief. Their problem is unbelief in who God says He is. And my goodness, if any of these guys have been around seeing what Jesus has been doing, they shouldn't have. I mean, even if they were Sadducees and liberals in the past, if they had been in Galilee for a little bit and saw what He did, their unbelief should have evaporated, but it didn't. You know, it didn't. And so he says that. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. And his example is we will become like angels in heaven. This is probably where the idea comes from, which is incredibly common. The idea of angels came from dead people. I don't know if you see that on Facebook. People talking about, you know, somebody died and now they're an angel in heaven. No, that's not what he's saying here. Angelic host, all of the angelic host, all of the angels were created at one time, way back in the beginning. And then they were tested by God. And some chose to go with Satan. And some chose not to.
But about a third of them didn't see?
Yes, and we get that from, I mean, that's somewhat cryptic. That's in Revelation 13. Revelation 12, I'm sorry. Revelation 12, right at the beginning, it talks about that. Yeah, and that's it for angels. In other words, there were a number of angels created, and there's none added. They don't procreate. There's a certain amount. So that's where angels come from. We become like angels in the sense that there is no procreation in heaven nor in the eternity. Now there's going to be procreation during the millennial reign, but remember, the people that populate the millennial kingdom are people who are, and we'll talk about this in chapter 25 of Matthew. They are people who survive the tribulation period. They're like us. They're alive. They're physical, have physical bodies, and they have come to faith in the Messiah during that period of time, and they are evaluated. That right there in Matthew 25, and they go right into the kingdom. So there'll be people by the end of the millennial kingdom. There'll be people that are well over 1,000 years old.
Bless their hearts.
Isn't that incredible? And to a certain degree, they will be probably health-wise similar to those in Genesis 5. Because as we saw Jesus do when he was here on earth, he reversed. He showed he had the power to reverse all of those results of the curse on the earth. And so during the millennial kingdom, he'll do that. So people will be, running marathons at 700 or something, This is going to be incredible. And of course, we're the royal family and we're judging and all that type of stuff during that period of time. So we will see it, even though we won't be in our physical bodies, we'll be glorified.
And Dusty, I was thinking of something with regards to their mockery about the wife and the brothers and so on. It seems to me that system was in place so that the ownership of the land was never tainted by another man from another tribe
That's
coming
exactly.
and mixing that all
Yes.
up. So
Yes,
at the end of the day, even if there was 7 brothers, the
Right.
land is still in the tribe that it was supposed to
Yes.
be in, because that was the big no-no, was to bring a man in from another tribe.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
that did accomplish that.
It sure did. Yeah, it had a purpose, which it wouldn't today. So we can't have multiple wives, guys. Okay.
Well, we can't even keep our property
I don't want
intact.
multiple wives. Okay.
I was gonna say, why?
I'm going to go with the original design. It works for me. All right. And another thing that they didn't understand about God, not only His power to just raise somebody from the dead, not only did they misunderstand how people exist in heaven, but they also didn't realize that when people die, that is not the end of their existence. He said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are alive right now. They never stopped being. And so they didn't understand that either. You see that? Have you not read what was spoken to you by God? I am the God of Abraham. And that's a quote from Exodus 3:6. Remember when at the burning bush, He said, "Tell them I am. I am eternally existing. I am." And so He is, He was, and He always will be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is not the God of the dead. These guys are not dead. These guys didn't end. Their existence did not stop like you Sadducees believe that they have. But they are living right now, and I'm their God. All right?
So basically, the Sadducees were just politicians.
Well, yeah, they were politicians.
And they didn't
that's for
believe in
sure.
anything whatsoever.
I don't know.
That's
I don't know.
Sadducee.
They were Democrats.
They're very similar to the present administration. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. They were, I'm sure they would have said, we're still people of faith.
Yeah.
But they weren't people of faith, of the biblical faith, or they would have understood the power of God. They would have understood the prophecies of resurrection. They would have understood that there's not procreation in heaven, and they would have understood that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are still alive. Remember, Jesus has already said, "Hey, when the kingdom comes in, there'll be people from the east and west come in and have supper. They'll eat with Abraham, you know, because he'll be right here in Israel, you know, probably in Jerusalem living." And all these Gentile nations that are going to exist at that time, they're going to come during those 3 feasts, and they're going to worship. So they didn't understand any of that.
Pastor, I don't remember where I read it.
Yes, sir.
In the Old Testament somewhere, that the brother of a man, when he died, he took his wife and spilled his seed on the ground,
Onan, yeah.
and God killed him.
I just read that. Yes, and that directly relates to
That happened
this.
in Genesis.
That directly relates to this. It's not. No, it's not in Genesis. It's
Correct.
in either 2 Samuel or 2 Chronicle, 1 Chronicles, somewhere
I don't know,
there.
I've been reading so
Yeah.
much.
Right.
I got it somewhere. It's
Yeah.
in the Bible, I know that.
Yes, and that's why, the reason why, you know, I have read books. I mean, we're getting way out there now, way off the topic, but this is important. There are books that people write that say that people should have children then God stops them, until God stops them. Okay, that's a doctrine out there that's believed, and I read a book on it years ago. And one of the arguments the guy used, by the way, that's not in the Bible. That God controls the womb, yes, absolutely. But nowhere does it say you have to keep having babies.
Killed the woman.
Yeah. And by the way, saying that I'm I'm not for any kind of birth control that causes abortions or anything. There's some of those. Doctors sometimes won't tell you that, but they do. You better do your research. I'm not for abortion or anything like that. But the bottom line is, two people, they get married, they talk about it, they look at their circumstances, they pray before God, they decide how many children they have. I believe God's good with that. But one of these books used that to defend this. They said God killed Onan because he spilled his seed. No, God killed Onan because the Mosaic law said he was to take his brother's wife and give her offspring so he could assume responsibility of that land. That's why he killed him. So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up. That's been under my skin for a while.
I don't know where I read it. But
Okay, yeah. Right. Yeah, no, I just read it too. I'm reading through the Bible. I just read it. So it's in 2 Samuel or 1 Chronicles or
Who was it?
somewhere.
The man's name, Onan?
Onan, O-N-A-N, I believe was his name. Yeah. So, but it was this command. He was supposed to take his brother's wife. And there's another story related to this. It's Tamar, isn't it?
That's where Jacob got her pregnant and. Yeah.
Yes, because Jacob was supposed to give his son. Now I may be getting these names confused, but he was supposed to give his son to her because of this same law in the Mosaic law. And seemed like he gave two sons. One died, he gave another one, he died, and he didn't want to give the other one. So again, he violated God's command. And that's when she acted like a harlot. He got her pregnant. And in the end, when he found out who she was, he said, she is more righteous than I.
Right.
Why? Because she obeyed God.
Right.
Now, she did it in a deceptive way, but how else was she going to do? Apparently God approved of that because she wanted to do it, because she wanted to obey God. He knew her heart. Any other odd stuff like that we want to talk about tonight?
I got one more.
Okay.
So in the cases we're talking about, okay, so there were two brothers,
Yes.
okay, and they're both married.
Yes.
Whatever. Okay, one of them dies. This doesn't apply if they already have a son, right?
No.
Okay, that's right.
No.
Because there's already.
No, it has to do with what. I'm
Onan
sorry.
is in Genesis 38.
Yeah.
Oh, you were right.
8 through 10.
You were right.
Genesis 38.
Genesis 38.
Genesis.
Genesis
38.
So you were right. I don't know why I just read that, but I did. All right. Okay, so the last, we've got 5 minutes. We can fly through this maybe. So the last section, the Pharisees again try to confuse him. And I'll just read through this. But when the Pharisees heard that Jesus, this is verse 34, had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered themselves together. One of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him. The lawyers are always, they like to argue, They're looking for some way to trip him up. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Those are quotes from Old Testament, obviously. The second is Leviticus 19:18, and the first one is Deuteronomy 6:5. So on these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. And the law and the prophets, there are several ways in the New Testament that it was a collective way to refer to the Old Testament. This is one of them, the law and the prophets. That talks about the whole Hebrew Bible. He said the whole Hebrew Bible is founded on those two things. He says, now while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them a question. What do you think about the Christ? Now, one of the things that I've started to do, and And I challenge you to do this as you read through, especially the book of Matthew. Every time it says Christ, say Messiah. Because that's really, it's, for some reason, and I'm assuming y'all are like me, when I read Christ, I don't think Messiah. I never have. There's just some kind of a language thing in my mind where it doesn't sound, you don't get the, I guess because we grow up saying Christ, 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 we don't think about the fact that this was the promised Messiah of the Old Testament who came and offered himself and his kingdom to Israel. So I've got to where when I see Christ, I say Messiah, especially in Matthew. So he's asking them about himself. What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? And of course, they said to him, the son of David, which is correct from a human standpoint. The Davidic covenant. He was going to be a son of David. That's why Matthew, started his gospel the way he did. He said, son of David, son of Abraham. He even put David before Abraham chronologically. Everything else is chronologically right in that Matthew 1. But he wanted to point out this is the son of David. And he said, okay, you talk about a conundrum. He's really going to confuse them here. He said to them, then how does David in the Spirit call him Lord? So what is David, the king of Israel, doing calling his son, really his great-grandson or whatever, Lord? And he quotes from Psalm 110. And Psalm 110 is a Messianic Psalm. It is a psalm that the Jews knew referred to the coming Messiah. In fact, I want to turn back and read Psalm 110 to you real quick. This is Psalm 110. The Lord says to my Lord, and by the way, that first Lord is Yahweh. It's the covenant God of Israel. That is our God. That is God. But that's the Hebrew name for the one true God, the covenant God of Israel. The Lord, so Yahweh says to my Lord, the second Lord is Adonai, which is another name for God. Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. The Lord will stretch forth your strong scepter from Zion, saying, rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will volunteer freely in the day of your power. In holy array, from the womb of the dawn. Interesting. Your youth are to you as the dew. The Lord has sworn, will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings in the day of his wrath. He will judge among the nations. He will fill them with corpses. He will shatter the chief men over a broad country. He will drink from the brook by the wayside. Therefore he will lift up his head. Sounds like a lot of destruction going to go on down the road. So this is the Messianic Psalm, and Jesus is simply pointing out that David is actually calling his son Lord here. He says, if David then calls him Lord, how is he his son? Okay, these are these intelligent, astute men that had all these incredible questions that they were going to confound Jesus with. How are they going to answer? No one was able to answer him a word, nor did anyone dare from that day on to ask him another question. They were done trying to confuse him or get him to where he'd answer and people would get upset with him.
They didn't learn their lesson very quickly, though.
No, they didn't. So I think the question answering, well, I know it is. The question answering is over. It's over. And in Matthew 23, Jesus is gonna just tell them very honestly who they are. And,
You know, it says somewhere that many, I don't know many, but scribes and Pharisees were converted to Jesus.
some of them were, yes. Yeah.
They were not all of them.
Yeah, no. No.
And MacArthur says that, and he says, but none of the Sadducees ever were converted.
No, they couldn't be. If you don't believe in resurrection,
Yeah.
that goes against everything you believe.
Yes, you gotta have some basis in believing the truth of the Bible to be saved. Because obviously, if the Sadducees didn't believe those major doctrines, they didn't believe in the original sin or anything else, probably.
He said he spoke to them in parables because he didn't want them to know.